There was a post on Truth Social yesterday that most people scrolled past without a second thought. But the foreign minister of Iran didn't scroll past it. And his response is a warning that reaches far beyond the Middle East. Let me explain what's actually happening here. Quick thing before we get into it. Drop the country you're watching from in the comments so I know where everyone's tuning in today. I actually read them. Let me set the scene for you. Thursday evening, July 23rd, 2026. U.S. Central Command launches its 13th consecutive night of strikes against Iran. 13 straight nights. That's not an operation. That's a rhythm. It's become routine. And routine in a situation like this is actually the most dangerous thing of all. But that's not what I want to talk about first. I want to talk about something else. Something that happened on Donald Trump's Truth Social account around the same time those bombs were falling. He put up a post that, on its surface, sounds like a simple accounting move, a financial decision. But when you actually read the words, and then you read the response from Tehran, it changes the entire picture of what's really happening right now. Most people are going to miss this part. They're going to hear about more strikes. They're going to see the headline about Iran firing back. And they'll assume it's just the usual back and forth. But it's not. Here's what Trump actually said. And I'm quoting him directly here. He wrote, "From this point forth, any and all damages done to ships, cargo, or anything related thereto will be paid for by Iranian money that the United States has in its possession and controls." He called it the fair and equitable thing to do. Fair and equitable. That was his word for it. Now ask yourself, if you're the Iranian Foreign Minister, Abbas Araghchi, what do you say to that? Well, he didn't wait long. Friday morning, Tehran time, Araghchi fired back. And his words were very specific. He called it, and I'm quoting, an incendiary precedent. Incendiary. That's a word that means flammable, explosive, something that catches fire and spreads. He said seizing another nation's assets to pay for unrelated future claims isn't just wrong, it's a dangerous precedent. And then he went further. He said, those who celebrate or profit from such funds should remember, once governments normalize confiscation, no one's assets are safe. Think about that line. No one's assets are safe. He's not just defending Iran's money here. He's warning every other country in the world. He's saying, if America gets away with this, what's to stop any country from doing it to anyone else? He's saying the rule of law itself is on the line. And then he adds something else, something that sounds almost like a prophecy. He said, the ensuing chaos will not be pretty or peaceful. So let's step back for a second because this whole thing is layered. On the surface, it's about money. Frozen Iranian assets, somewhere around $6 billion, held in accounts that the U.S. has access to. But underneath that, it's about whether the United States is going to use that money as a weapon, a literal financial weapon pointed at a sovereign nation. Now we have to talk about the history here, because this didn't happen in a vacuum. For months, Iran and the U.S. have been circling each other. Earlier this summer, there was a memorandum of understanding, a sort of peace deal mediated by Pakistan and Qatar. It was supposed to end the conflict on all fronts. It was supposed to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, get Iranian oil flowing again, release those frozen assets. It was a fragile, complicated deal, but it was a deal. And then came the strikes. 13 nights of strikes, like I said. That's not in the MOU. That's the opposite of the MOU. So you have to ask yourself, where does this leave the agreement? Is it dead? Or is the U.S. using military action to get a better negotiating position? And where does Trump's Truth Social post fit into that strategy? Here's where the manipulation comes in. Because if you read Trump's post, he says the damages will be paid for with Iranian money. But he doesn't specify what damages. He's talking about ships and cargo. But whose ships? Cargo from where? It's a blank check. He could interpret that to mean any damage, anywhere, from any incident he chooses to pin on Iran. And that brings us right back to Araghchi's response. Unrelated future claims. He's pointing out the obvious. Trump is saying, I'm going to take your money now to pay for things that haven't even happened yet, that you may or may not be responsible for. That's not justice. That's hostage-taking, financial hostage-taking. And here's where it gets even darker for all of us, not just Iran. Araghchi's warning isn't just for the Ayatollahs. It's for every nation on earth that holds assets in dollars, in U.S. banks, in U.S. jurisdiction. If the United States can do this to Iran, what's to stop them from doing it to a less adversarial country? What's to stop them from doing it to an ally if the relationship sours? He's right. Once you normalize it, no one's assets are safe. Not Saudi Arabia's, not Japan's, not Britain's, not yours if you had money in the system. He's pointing out that the US dollar's status as the global reserve currency depends on trust. And when you weaponize that trust, you're taking a hammer to the foundation of the whole system. That's what he means by ensuing chaos. Now, I want to be careful here. I'm not defending Iran. I'm not defending their regime. But I am saying that doesn't make this particular move okay. It doesn't make it okay because of what it invites in return. Think about it. What happens if Iran decides to retaliate, not with missiles, but with lawfare? They could freeze American assets in Iranian banks. They could encourage other countries to do the same. They could start a global tit-for-tat where everyone starts grabbing everyone else's money. And the global economy, which runs on credit and trust, would start to fracture. That's the chaos Araghchi is talking about. And he's not alone in pointing that out. Look at who has been silent so far. The European Union, China, Russia, the Gulf states. They're all watching this. They're all taking notes. Because if this becomes the new normal, they're all exposed. So the question is this a one-off threat, or is this a new doctrine? Let's go back to the military situation for a minute, because it's all connected. The 13th consecutive night of strikes. That's a military campaign that's been going on nonstop, and it's escalating. Trump told Axios just before this that he's considering restarting major combat operations, bigger than the strikes he launched in February. That means more bombs, more targets, more risk of escalation. And here's the thing about that. CENTCOM said the strikes are meant to hold Iran accountable and diminish threats from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to commercial shipping. But you have to ask yourself, is it working? Because after 13 straight nights, they're still going. If you're fighting every night, you're not winning. You're just sustaining the conflict. And that's where the money comes in. The U.S. is spending billions of dollars on these strikes. The Iranian assets are worth about $6 billion. That's not going to cover the cost of the campaign for very long. So if they're not doing it for the money, why do it? What's the real strategic goal? Could it be that the administration is looking for ways to squeeze Iran economically without having to negotiate? Could it be that by declaring the assets forfeit, they're closing the door on the MOU and opening the door to something else, something more aggressive? Let me give you a timeline, because it helps to see this clearly. Friday, July 24th, Araghchi responds. He's doing this on X, the platform for the world to see. He's not sending a diplomatic cable. He's not holding a press conference. He's using social media just like Trump. This isn't a back-channel negotiation. It's a public argument. Now, I need to show you something else he said, because it frames the whole thing. I'm quoting him again. Once governments normalize confiscation, no one's assets are safe. This is the core of his argument, and it's a powerful one. It's not a threat. It's a statement of fact. International law is only as strong as the consensus behind it. If the U.S. breaks the consensus breaks. Simple as that. And then he says, ensuing chaos will not be pretty or peaceful. That's his final line. It's almost like a warning to the American people, not just the administration. He's saying, you might think you're punishing Iran, but you're actually opening a Pandora's box that will come back to haunt everyone, including you. Now let's be honest. There's a segment of the American public that loves this. They love the tough talk. They love that we're finally being tough on Iran. And I get it. I understand the frustration with Iran. They've done a lot of bad stuff. They've funded terrorism. They've destabilized the region. I'm not going to pretend they haven't. But that doesn't mean every action against them is wise or effective. And I'm starting to think this one is neither. Because think about what Iran is actually doing right now. They've been hit by 13 straight nights of airstrikes. They're under a naval blockade. Their economy is in ruins. And now the U.S. is saying, we're going to take your last major liquid asset and use it to fund the military campaign against you. Do you think that makes them more likely to cave or more likely to fight? If you've seen anything from the last few decades, you already know the answer. They're going to dig in. They're going to retaliate, either directly or through their proxies, Hezbollah, the Houthis. And that means the region is going to get more volatile, not less. More shipping will get hit. More ships will be damaged. And then Trump will have even more damages to claim against the Iranian assets. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. He's creating a situation where he can justify the very policy he's already implementing. That's not strategy. That's just circular logic. It's an excuse to keep hitting them, and it's a way to fund the strikes without asking Congress for more money. It's financial sleight of hand. And that's the part that really should worry you. Because if a president can unilaterally seize another country's assets and use them to fund military actions, what's the limit? What's to stop him from doing it again with another country? Let's say a country in South America. Let's say a country in Europe. Let's say China. Once the precedent is set, the Pentagon is going to be looking at international bank accounts like an ATM machine. Now, I don't want to get too conspiracy-brained, but you have to connect the dots here. There's an election this year. There's a lot of political theater. And the global audience, they see this too. They see the U.S. using its financial heft to bully a weaker country. They see the dollar being used as a weapon. And they're asking themselves, what's the point of holding dollars if they can be taken away? This is the kind of thing that accelerates de-dollarization. Other countries are already moving away from the dollar. They're trading in yuan, they're trading in gold, they're setting up alternative payment systems. And every time the U.S. does something like this, it gives them more ammunition. They can say, see, look what happens. Your money isn't safe. And that's bad for America. That's bad for the economy. It means higher interest rates, fewer buyers for our debt, a weaker dollar, higher inflation. The damage from this move goes way beyond Iran. It's a global financial shock waiting to happen. But here's the thing. Nobody's talking about that part. The mainstream coverage is Trump threatens Iran, Iran hits back. It's the same story they've been running for decades, but they're missing the bigger shift. They're missing that this is a fundamental redefinition of how the U.S. wields power. We're not just a military superpower anymore. We're becoming a financial superpower that steals from its enemies. And that's not a comfortable look. Let me take you back to the phrase Araghchi used, incendiary precedent. A precedent that catches fire. He's warning the world that if this goes through, it will be a fire that consumes the international financial system. And he's right. Look at what happened this morning in Tehran. It was Friday, a holy day in Iran. The strikes had just happened again the night before. The economy is reeling, and the foreign minister is on social media telling the world that the United States is essentially holding a gun to the head of the global financial order. That's the context. And then you have the domestic angle. Because this plays well in certain circles. It plays well with voters who are tired of foreign wars and just want to hear that the U.S. is going to get paid back. It plays well with the America First crowd. The messaging is simple. Why should our taxpayers pay for the cost of defending shipping? Make Iran pay for it. That's the selling point. But you have to ask yourself, is it effective? Is seizing $6 billion going to deter Iran, or is it just going to make them more desperate? Desperate regimes are dangerous regimes. They lash out. They take risks. They make decisions that rational regimes wouldn't make. This isn't a theory. We've seen it in North Korea. We've seen it in Venezuela. And we could see it in Iran. The regime is under pressure. The people are under pressure. And now their foreign minister is publicly saying, you're creating a norm where your own assets won't be safe. That's a message to the rest of the world. It's a warning label on the U.S. financial system. And it's hard to unring that bell. So what happens next? That's the question. We're in uncharted territory. We've had sanctions before. We've had asset freezes. But we haven't had a president publicly declare that he's going to use seized assets to pay for damages that haven't happened yet. That's new. The Iranians are going to push back. They're going to file lawsuits. They're going to appeal to international courts. They're going to plead their case to other nations. And it's going to be a mess. But the real battle will be in the court of public opinion and in the market reaction. If investors start to get nervous about U.S. assets, the market will respond quickly. And that's the thing that keeps me up at night. It's not the bombs. It's not the rhetoric. It's the quiet erosion of trust that happens beneath the surface of all this chaos. Trust in the dollar. Trust in the rule of law. Trust in American institutions. Once that trust is gone, you can't just get it back with a tweet. It takes years, decades, and during those years, the world gets a lot more fractured. I'm not telling you this to scare you. I'm telling you this because it's important to understand the full weight of what happened on Thursday and Friday. A president posted a message that could be interpreted as an act of financial war. A foreign minister responded by calling it a threat to global security. And the military strikes continue, night after night. Now, I want to end with something that's been bothering me. We spend a lot of time talking about Iran's nuclear program. We spend a lot of time talking about their missiles. We spend a lot of time talking about their proxies. But we don't talk enough about their diplomatic sophistication. Araghchi's statement wasn't just a rejection. It was a reframing. He took a U.S. financial threat and turned it into a global warning. He said, no one's assets are safe. He made it about everyone, not just Iran. That's smart. That's strategic. It's designed to create concern in the international community. It's designed to make other nations think twice about accepting U.S. leadership on this issue. And you have to wonder if the administration anticipated that response. Because if they didn't, they should have. If they did, then they're playing a game of 4D chess that I'm not sure they have the pieces for. Because the response from Iran isn't just hot air. It's a calculated move to isolate the U.S. legally and diplomatically. And it might work, because other countries, even allies, they're watching this, and they don't like it. They don't like the precedent. They don't like the capriciousness. They don't like the idea that the U.S. could just decide one day to take their money. So they might not say anything publicly, but behind closed doors, they're furious. This is one of those moments where you see the game of nations played at its highest level. It's not just about the money. It's about the principle. It's about what the world looks like after this moment. And I think we might be looking at a world that's a lot more chaotic. So let's go back to the beginning, to that Truth Social post. It seemed small, didn't it? It seemed like another presidential rant. But when you trace the lines outward, from that post to the strikes, from the strikes to the Iranian response, from the response to the global financial system, you start to see the outline of something bigger, something that could change the way the world works. And that's why I wanted to walk you through this, because the headlines are going to focus on the bombs. But the real story is happening in the bank accounts, in the legal arguments, and in the minds of foreign leaders who are now reevaluating their relationship with the United States. Here's what I think. We are watching the unraveling of the post-World War II order. The order that was built on rules, on treaties, on trust. It's not dying all at once. It's dying by 1,000 cuts. And this is one of those cuts. A deep one. A financial cut. And when the dust settles, when the strikes are over and the ships are safe, what are we left with? We're left with a world where might makes right, where the strong take from the weak, where your assets are only safe as long as the U.S. says they are. That's not a world I want to live in. That's not a world that benefits America in the long run. And I think deep down, most people know that. They just haven't thought about it long enough. They haven't connected the dots. Iran fired back today, not with missiles, with words. But those words might be more powerful than any bomb, because they pointed out the emperor's new clothes. They said, this is legalized theft. And they're right. So I want you to hold that thought as you watch the news, as you see the next strike or the next counterstrike. Remember this moment. Remember that the conflict isn't just about military targets. It's about the very nature of international law. And we're about to find out if that law still means anything. What happens if Iran does the same thing? What if they seize some of our assets? What if they encourage the Houthis to nationalize a tanker? Where does it end? It doesn't end. That's the answer. It just spirals. It just gets worse. And that's what Araghchi was warning us about. That's the ensuing chaos. It won't be pretty. So, stay with me on this channel. We're going to be watching this situation closely. There's so much more to understand here than any of us want to admit. But you can't look away. Not from this. We'll talk more about it tomorrow.